After many years of marriage, why do so many women begin to feel distant from their husbands in their golden years? The reasons aren't just emotional, they're painfully practical. Many couples enter retirement expecting to enjoy their time together, but instead, they find themselves drifting apart. So, what's really going on behind the scenes in these marriages? And more importantly, can your relationship avoid this situation? By the end of this video, you'll understand 5 key reasons why women's affection for their husbands fades over time. These aren't just theories. These are real, practical insights, backed by decades of research and the experiences of thousands of couples. Whether you're already feeling that distance or want to prevent it, stay with me until the end. I would appreciate it if you like this video. You can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1 if you don't like it. Comment number 0 to let me know so I can make a better video for you. Let's begin. The first and perhaps most fundamental reason why women grow to resent their husbands in later years lies in a burden that remains largely invisible until it becomes unbearable. This silent strain hasn't been building for just months or years, but for decades, wearing down even the most loving and patient hearts. Why does emotional labor cause such deep resentment in older women? Because it represents years of unacknowledged effort, a lifetime of giving that was treated as simply expected rather than appreciated. Imagine working a demanding job for 50 years without recognition, without thanks, and without anyone even acknowledging that you're working at all. That's the reality many women face in their marriages. For decades, women serve as the emotional caretakers of their relationships and families. They remember birthdays and anniversaries, keep in touch with children and grandchildren, schedule medical appointments, mediate family conflicts, and nurture relationships with extended family and friends. They carry in their minds an intricate web of everyone's needs, preferences, relationships, and emotional states. Dr. Lillian Rubin's groundbreaking research with older couples revealed something stunning. Women perform up to 70% of what psychologists call relationship maintenance work. The invisible emotional labor that keeps human connections alive and functioning. 70%. Imagine any other partnership where one person consistently does 70% of the work, and you'll begin to understand the imbalance that creates such profound exhaustion. Margaret and Robert's story illustrates this dynamic with heartbreaking clarity. Married for 47 years, they had what many would consider a successful marriage, raising 3 children, supporting each other through life's challenges, and building a comfortable retirement. But beneath the surface, an imbalance had been growing for decades. "I was always the one who remembered everyone's birthdays," Margaret told, her voice weary. "I was the one who knew when the grandkids had soccer games or dance recitals. I was the one who maintained our friendships, planned our social life, and kept up with Robert's family, his siblings, their children, everyone. When he had troubles at work, I was his sounding board, his comfort, his steady support." When they reached their 70s, Margaret developed rheumatoid arthritis that significantly limited her energy. What happened next reveals why emotional labor becomes such a source of resentment. "What shocked me wasn't that Robert didn't step up to handle these things," Margaret continued. "It was that he didn't even see them as things that needed handling. When I couldn't make all the calls and arrangements I usually did, he simply complained that things weren't getting done. He never once asked how I was feeling or acknowledged all I'd been doing. He just wanted to know why I hadn't called his sister about their upcoming visit." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she said, "That's when I realized, after nearly 50 years together, that he had never actually seen all the work I did. Not truly. And if he couldn't see it even when I physically couldn't do it anymore, he never would." When a woman in her 60s or 70s finally says, "I can't do this anymore," it's not a sudden change of heart or inexplicable mood. It's the result of years of invisible work that was never acknowledged, appreciated, or shared. It's the final realization that the emotional imbalance that defined her marriage will never correct itself. The second major reason why women grow to resent their husbands in later years revolves around something seemingly mundane but profoundly impactful: housework. This isn't about perfectionism or nagging, it's about a fundamental inequity that becomes increasingly burdensome as couples age. Why does housework create such deep-seated resentment? Because it represents a promise unfulfilled. Most women entered retirement with a reasonable expectation. After decades of juggling work, childcare, and household management, retirement would finally bring equality. Both partners would have the same free time and the same energy limitations, and therefore should share the same responsibilities. When that doesn't happen, it feels like a profound betrayal. Even in our supposedly enlightened era, the distribution of household labor remains dramatically unequal. A comprehensive University of Michigan study tracking couples into their 70s and 80s found something disturbing. Women continue to perform approximately 65% of household tasks even after retirement, when both partners presumably have equal free time. Let that sink in. 65%. That's not a small imbalance. It's an overwhelming majority of the work falling on one person's shoulders. For women who have balanced careers, childcare, and housekeeping for decades, the expectation that they will continue being the primary homemaker in their older years doesn't just feel unfair. It feels like a life sentence. Eleanor's story brings this statistic painfully to life. At 72, she had been looking forward to retirement as a time of shared responsibility and leisure with Tom, her husband of 46 years. When Tom retired from the bank, I thought finally we'd share responsibilities equally, Eleanor told, frustration evident in her voice. Instead, he treats every day like Saturday. Reading the paper, watching TV, going golfing, while I'm still doing laundry, cooking, and cleaning. Eleanor leaned forward, her expression intense. Last week, I actually counted. I made 27 trips to put things away that he had left out. 27. Glasses on the coffee table, jacket thrown over a chair, mail scattered on the counter. At our age, that's not just annoying, it's physically exhausting. What makes this particularly poignant is how the physical toll of housework increases dramatically with age. Tasks that were once merely tedious become genuinely painful as arthritis, reduced mobility, and fatigue set in. Bending to pick things up, carrying laundry baskets, scrubbing bathrooms, all become increasingly difficult and sometimes physically painful endeavors. Dr. Richard Hartman, who specializes in geriatric medicine, explains, I see many women in their 70s with repetitive strain injuries and joint pain directly related to household tasks. When I suggest their spouses could help more, I often hear, he wouldn't know how, or it's easier to just do it myself than to ask. This is a significant health issue that rarely gets addressed. Yet research consistently shows that men rarely increase their share of household labor to compensate for their wives' increasing physical limitations. If anything, as men age, they often expect more caretaking from their wives, not less. What hurts the most, Eleanor continued, is that Tom doesn't even see what I'm doing. When I asked him to help more, he seemed genuinely confused and said, "But you've always done the housework," as if that's the natural order of things, no matter how old we get or how much my arthritis bothers me. This practical reality, having to continue physical labor while dealing with the challenges of aging, creates a very concrete reason for resentment. It's not about the occasional dirty dish or unpaired sock. It's about the accumulation of thousands of small inequities over years and decades, creating a mountain of resentment that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. 3. Retirement changes everything, but not always for the better. When you've spent decades looking forward to retirement, it's supposed to be the reward for all those years of hard work. But for many women, retirement brings an unexpected challenge that often leads to resentment. Their husbands suddenly expect them to become full-time companions, entertainers, and caregivers. Why does this create such deep resentment? The answer is simple but profound. For over 40 years, many men of our generation built their entire identity around work. Their social connections, sense of purpose, and daily structure all came from their careers. When that suddenly disappears, they're left with a big void, and they expect their wives to fill it. Meanwhile, women who have juggled multiple roles throughout their lives, balancing careers with managing households and raising children, see retirement as their long-awaited chance for freedom and self-discovery. After decades of putting everyone else first, they finally have time for themselves. But instead of enjoying that freedom, they find themselves with a new full-time job, keeping their husbands busy, happy, and entertained. The Boston Retirement Study, which tracked 400 couples through their transition to retirement, found that women report a 30% decrease in life satisfaction when their husbands retire without independent interests. That's not a small dip. It's a significant drop in quality of life that leads to resentment over time. Barbara and James' story perfectly illustrates this. They had been married for 51 years when James retired from his accounting firm. Like many men of his generation, James had invested everything in his career and never developed hobbies or close friendships outside of work. The first week of his retirement felt like a vacation, Barbara said. By the second week, I was losing my mind. James followed me everywhere, from room to room, asking what we were going to do, where we were going, and who we were seeing. When I wanted to attend my weekly painting class, something I'd looked forward to for years, he acted hurt and said I was abandoning him. I remember standing in the kitchen thinking, this isn't what I signed up for. I've already raised our children. I don't want to raise him too. Barbara had carefully planned her own retirement. She had joined a painting group, volunteered at the library, and reconnected with college friends. But James's constant need for attention and companionship made pursuing any of these interests feel impossible without causing conflict. The worst part wasn't even his neediness, Barbara shared. It was realizing that after 51 years of marriage, he had no idea who I was beyond being his wife. He couldn't understand why I'd want to do anything that didn't include him. It made me wonder if he'd ever really seen me as a complete person, with my own needs and interests. This creates a painful dilemma for many women. Their need for some independence directly conflicts with their husband's expectation of constant companionship. It's not that they stop loving their husbands. It's that, after decades of caretaking, they finally need space to rediscover who they are beyond the roles of wife, mother, and homemaker. When that space is denied, resentment inevitably follows. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move forward to the next. One of the most painful experiences in a long-term marriage isn't the big arguments, it's the slow, crushing weight of feeling invisible. This fourth reason why women grow to resent their husbands in later years hits particularly hard because it touches on something fundamental: the need to be heard and acknowledged. Why is this issue so powerful that it leads women to emotionally disconnect from marriages that have lasted half a century? The answer lies in understanding how the human heart works. We can weather disagreements, we can navigate differences, but being repeatedly dismissed or ignored creates a wound that doesn't heal. It just gets deeper with each passing year. A groundbreaking 15-year study by Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington uncovered something remarkable. Couples who divorced later in life often showed a clear pattern years or even decades earlier. That pattern wasn't dramatic fighting. It was husbands consistently turning away from their wives' attempts to connect. These bids for connection could be as simple as a comment about the weather, sharing a bit of news, or expressing a concern. When these small gestures are met with indifference, distraction, or dismissal, something vital in the relationship begins to fade. Judith's story paints this picture with heartbreaking clarity. At 76, she had been married to Richard for over 5 decades. For our 50th anniversary, Judith shared, her voice quiet but steady, I gathered my courage and told Richard I wanted us to take a cruise, something I'd dreamed of my whole life. I'd even researched options and costs. She paused, the pain still clear years later. He just nodded and said, maybe someday, without even looking up from his newspaper. Judith continued, 3 months later, Richard couldn't understand why I wasn't excited about planning our anniversary dinner at the local restaurant we always go to. He seemed genuinely confused by my lack of enthusiasm. But why would I be excited? He hadn't really heard me in years. What was the point of sharing my dreams or opinions when they simply disappeared into thin air? At some point, you just stop talking. What's especially sad about Judith's experience is that Richard probably didn't realize the damage he was causing. Like many men of his generation, he likely believed that providing financially and avoiding major conflicts meant they had a good marriage. He couldn't see the invisible wall that had been built brick by brick, silence by silence, dismissal by dismissal. This isn't just an emotional issue, it's physical too. Neuroscience research shows that being socially dismissed activates the same neural pathways in our brains as physical pain. When your spouse consistently doesn't hear you, your brain processes it as hurt. For women who have endured decades of this quiet dismissal, the accumulated effect manifests as emotional withdrawal. Not because they no longer care, but as a self-protective mechanism the brain develops to avoid more pain. This explains why so many men in long-term marriages are genuinely surprised when their wives seem distant or uninterested. They don't realize that their years of half-listening, dismissing concerns, or minimizing feelings have trained their wives to expect invisibility and to protect themselves accordingly. When you realize you have more years behind you than ahead, settling for less becomes impossible. There comes a moment in every person's life when time suddenly feels different. For many women in their 60s and 70s, this awareness of mortality becomes a powerful catalyst for change. The fifth, and perhaps most profound reason why women begin to reevaluate their marriages in later life. Why does this realization impact women's feelings toward their husbands so dramatically? Because facing our own mortality strips away pretense and forces us to confront an essential truth. Our time is limited and precious. When that reality sinks in, tolerating an unfulfilling relationship suddenly feels not just disappointing, but wasteful. The Stanford Center on Longevity's research confirms this psychological shift. Their studies found that individuals over 65 experience something called socio-emotional selectivity, a heightened sense of limited time that makes immediate emotional satisfaction feel more urgent than long-term investments in difficult relationships. For women who have spent decades compromising, accommodating, and putting others first, this awareness often triggers uncomfortable but necessary questions. Am I happy? Is this how I want to spend my remaining years? Have I been settling for less than I deserve? Catherine's story illustrates this awakening with striking clarity. At 68, after much thought, she made the difficult decision to separate from her husband of 42 years. My best friend, Linda, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, Catherine shared. Watching her battle that illness changed everything for me. We'd sit together during her treatments, talking about life, regrets, and the things she wished she'd done differently. It was like a lightning bolt. I realized I might have 10 or 20 good years left if I'm lucky. Did I want to spend them feeling lonely in my marriage? Always being the caretaker, never the one cared for? Catherine straightened her shoulders as she continued. For the first time in my life, I felt selfish, but in a necessary way. I kept thinking about something Linda said to me before she died. Don't wait until you're dying to start living. So I didn't wait. I told Frank I needed more. And when nothing changed after months of trying, I moved into my own apartment. My children were shocked at first, but now they tell me I seem happier than they've ever seen me. What's important to understand about Catherine's experience, and that of many women her age, is that this awakening isn't about falling out of love or suddenly finding fault with a once beloved husband. It's about recognizing that life is precious, limited, and deserving of joy. Many women reach a point where they simply no longer have the energy to fight, beg, or ask for attention, affection, or respect. Instead, they make the practical, even necessary decision to prioritize their own well-being. For some women, this means emotionally withdrawing while staying in the marriage. For others, it means taking the more dramatic step of leaving. Recent statistics reveal the trend. Gray divorce rates among Americans over 65 have doubled since 1990, with women initiating more than 70% of these separations. What often appears as sudden dissatisfaction to bewildered husbands has usually been building for years. a quiet, practical calculation about how to best spend the remaining chapters of life. Dr. Ellen Garrett, who specializes in later life transitions, puts it simply. In our youth, women are often taught that relationships require endless sacrifice. In elderhood, many women finally give themselves permission to prioritize their own happiness. It's not selfishness. It's self-preservation. The journey through these 5 reasons reveals something profound about why women grow distant from their husbands in later years. It's rarely about falling out of love. It's about practical realities that slowly erode connection. Unrecognized emotional labor, unequal household responsibilities, retirement imbalances, feeling unheard, and the urgency of limited time. The good news? Understanding these issues gives couples the power to change their trajectory. Love doesn't have to fade with age, but it does require conscious attention and adaptation. What changes could you make today in your relationship? Perhaps begin by truly recognizing the invisible work your partner does, sharing responsibilities more equally, or making space for each other's independence. Small daily efforts to listen, appreciate, and share life's burdens can rebuild what years of neglect have eroded. After all, our remaining years are precious. Shouldn't they be our best years together?